Hey everyone, Radney here with 3 Wide to bring you this week's episode where we are going to go over Sunday's action from Martinsville Speedway, as well as touching on a couple topics from Friday night's Craftsman Truck Series race. Now, Kyle Larson got the win on Sunday, his first at Martinsville Speedway, getting his first grandfather clock, and Rick Hendrick, they get their 28th win at the track overall. But the big talking point at this race was the racing itself, the action on the track. This was the second true test for the new short track package that NASCAR has implemented. And I still believe after this race, it is a step in the right direction. Now, many members of the media, fans, and drivers alike, they believe it was a bad race. Still couldn't pass out there. There are still issues with this car. Denny Hamlin was the most outspoken, talking after finishing fourth that this is the new NASCAR. You just can't go out there and pass. And several fans just not happy with the action they saw on the track. I'm still saying this is a step in the right direction. It was a much better race this year than any of the two last year. This year we had over 2,000 passes on the track under green flag conditions, which is the most here at Martinsville since the 2015 spring race. Last year in both races, the fall race especially, they didn't even break over 1,000 passes. The reason that race was so memorable was you had Christopher Bell with his walk-off win to go to the championship race, as well as Ross Chastain's Hail Melon wall ride at the end of the race that got him in the championship round. And that's a moment that will live in NASCAR history forever. But for this race itself, like I said, I believe it's a step in the right direction still. There's plenty to still be done. And I think right now, okay, let's get away from the aero side of the car. The big fixes need to be the tires. They need to come in with a tire that wears more, that you can see drivers coming and going. I think that would make a huge difference. The shifting through the corners, that's a big problem, I think, still for the track. These drivers are overshooting the corner, or if they mess up, they simply just grab a gear and go back, and it's pretty much like the mistake never happened. So that needs to go away back to the way it was. And, of course, the horsepower, the engine itself, which NASCAR Vice President of Competition, Elton Sawyer, said today that any changes with the horsepower of the engines, that would take some time to get done. So that's not going to be a quick fix. But the tire situation, I believe, could be the quickest fix and the better alternative. I think if you bring in a tire that shows more wear, the drivers have to manage more, that will make for even better racing than we saw Sunday. Now, the horsepower would help with the tire. Denny Hamlin, he went over it in his podcast on Monday, went really in depth and brought a lot of great information to it, where when they started, tinkering with this horsepower, when NASCAR did, he was discussing how much of a difference you could see in your lap times when they would take away 50 horsepower, 100 horsepower, and how it really didn't affect lap times. He said, if anything, you would be going quicker 40 laps into a run than before. And without this horsepower, it's not allowing the tires to spin, not letting these drivers spin the tires and getting that wear and tear on it. But you can still bring, I believe, a softer tire and have more wear on it, even with this engine package. And that's, to me, the big thing. The second biggest thing is the gear shifting. Whether that's something that can be quickly, put in, I'm not sure. I want to just say, take a breath. Let's take a breath, sit back. The racing wasn't that bad Sunday. We had more lead changes in this one race than we did at either of the races last year. And you still had comers and goers throughout the field. Look at the final restart. You had Martin Truex Jr. just right around 15th on that final restart. He works his way up to third, really looked like to be the fastest car on the track. If there was another caution, he would have been the guy to beat. He came through when a lot of drivers in front of him took 2 tires or no tires. He was able to take advantage of it. And then Chase Elliott, who was running his first race since his leg injury, he restarted just outside the top 20 and made it all the way up to a 10th place finish with his fresher tires. So it's right there. The results are right there. We're seeing it getting better. We're seeing the positive of these changes, but you still have, like I said, some things to fix, and a lot of it has to do with tires. The fresh tires help Truex and Chase, but you still have guys out there on old tires like Joey Logano, who stayed out. He restarted in the lead. He lost it to Kyle Larson, who took 2 tires, but Logano still finished second. Denny Hamlin, he was on the old tires. He finished in fourth. He really didn't lose anything on the restarts. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who had been nowhere near the front like Logano all day, he stays out on those older tires, comes away with an 8th place finish. So it was a positive result for these guys staying out there on the older tires. But that's not the way it should be, especially at Martinsville. These guys back in the day, if they had stayed out on their older tires, as soon as that green flag would have failed, they'd have sunk right to the back of the running order, probably would have been lapped by the end of the race. So you're seeing this kind of tug of war with the fresh tires versus old tires. I think if they come with a different tire compound for the fall race, that'll make a big difference. I think when we go back to Richmond and Bristol in the fall, that is going to help that's going to help tremendously, because you're going there during part of the hottest time of the year for these tracks. It's going to be slick, so tires won't be as much of an issue there. But when you go back to Martinsville in the fall, when it's freezing cold out there, you need to have the best tire out there that can wear and have comers and goers, and strategy becomes a true factor in the race. And there was a media member today, Nate Ryan, who put out a thread on Twitter, and everything he put out, I agree with wholeheartedly. It's pretty much where I stand on the issue of Martinsville and this new short track package. You have a lot of people that are acting like this is going to be the end of NASCAR as we know it, the end of short track racing as we know it. It's just the biggest loss in NASCAR history. I would just say pump the brakes, take a look at the stats, look at the history of the racing at Martinsville to get a complete picture. And Nate Ryan put out on Twitter, and I'll go through his thread a little bit here, touch on it, where he starts off saying this is apparently a hot take. He watched Sunday's race at Martinsville and thought it mostly looked like Martinsville, which has always been about track position, strategy, and also will always be about these things. Now, he did mention on the low downforce package, he agrees that NASCAR needs to make the following changes: eliminating shifting at speed on ovals. This should have been done before this season, he mentioned. Also, the increasing the horsepower and increasing tire fall off. And Sunday's race had 3 different leaders under green in the final 100 laps. Kyle Larson on 2 tires passed 5 cars in the final 46 laps to win the race. There were 2,026 green flag passes in 400 laps. Last year, and this was a cool stat for me to see, there were a total of 1,907 passes in 903 laps ran in both Martinsville races last season. So you can see the huge difference there. Now, Denny Hamlin did send out on Twitter today, talking to a member of NASCAR.com who had done a story about these green flag passes, seeing more of them Sunday, where he asked, does this include during green flag pit stops when, positions are constantly changing? Does this count towards that total? Which that was a confirmation that does go into the tally. But even still, if you're going to use that argument, you have to use it for all the previous Martinsville races, including last year's 2 races. And still, you have a much higher number of passes this season than last year. Martin Truex Jr. said himself in a post-race interview that the racing was much better this year. And I think you can see that when you look at the stats and you go back and watch the race. Nate Ryan also said he's covered Martinsville for 24 years. Sunday wouldn't touch his top 10, which there's no surprise there. That's not like this was a, historic race at Martinsville like we've seen before, like last year's Hale Mellon move or Jeff Gordon winning in his final season to go to the championship race. This was just a decent Martinsville race. Before we move on to our next topic, let me tell you about our friends over at Hunt to Harvest. Now, if you're wanting to update and upgrade your hunting apparel, head over to hunttoharvest.com and check out their spring 2023 collection, where they have new styles in for turkey hunters and different types of fishing. Now, they still have plenty of hats, especially in the Richardson 112 style, and their mystery box special is still going on. So do not hesitate to click on that link below and support this great brand who know hunting is about spending time with loved ones, providing for your family through the harvest, and giving thanks to the one who created all things big and small. And when you go over there and go to check out, be sure to enter that promo code RADNEY18923 to get an additional 10% off on your purchase at checkout. Now, normally we don't discuss Craftsman Truck Series racing in the video. I save most of the in-depth conversation on the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series for my podcast, but Friday's race was rather interesting at Martinsville for the Truck Series. It was the first time that NASCAR raced on, whether you want to call it the rain tire, the damp tire, the wet tire, the treaded tire, whatever you want to call it, the first time they raced on a wet weather tire in competition on an oval. And this has been tested numerous times over the years. This was the first time we were going to see it in action. Rain was all over the place on Friday night. And NASCAR sent them out there with these wet tires. Probably could have went out a little bit earlier, but NASCAR wasn't wanting to dive headfirst into this, send these drivers out there not truly knowing what was going to happen. So the track was pretty close to being dry when they went out there on these tires. And the experiment worked out. We still saw some great racing. You saw a ton of fall off in the lap times with these tires, but they made about 25 laps and then it was time to get on the slicks. So from here on out, I think you'll see NASCAR get more and more aggressive with putting drivers out there on this wet tire if the track is still a little damp. Obviously, they're not going to send them out there in a rainstorm or anything like that. They're just trying to cut back the drying time, get the cars on the track as fast as they can to try and finish a race before more weather comes in. But the biggest thing to watch Friday night was Carson Hocevar. Now, Carson won a couple weeks ago at Texas Motor Speedway in not controversial fashion, in my opinion. A lot of people did think so with his wrecking of Nick Sanchez into Zane Smith going into the first corner on the last lap. I viewed that move as simply, you have your first win right there in front of you. Nick Sanchez and Zane, they were already out of shape going in the first corner. And if you're going for your first career win, are you going to let off the gas, or are you just going to find a hole and go to it no matter what? So I don't have a problem with Carson and the racing he did for his first win at Texas. But Carson does have a history of making some not so smart decisions, whether it be wrecking someone intentionally, spinning himself out intentionally, to bring out a caution. He has not had some good moments in the series. But Friday night, rather, well, I feel like was probably one of the lowest I've seen Carson race in the Truck Series, just because you had multiple incidents with him in such a short period of time. He looked like a guy who just could not control himself, like he thought he was racing NASCAR Thunder 2004 back in the day. So what really kicked off things for Carson was some contact, with William Sawalich, 16-year-old making his first start with Tricon. He's a TRD driver. You can tell he's kind of being looked at as the next big superstar for Toyota, along with, I'm sure, Corey Heim, and was very impressive in his debut. Finished in the top 10, but first had to get through Carson Hocevar. Now, you can see coming off the corner that, close short track racing like normal, nothing over the top by any of these three drivers, Ben Rhodes, Hocevar, or Sawalich at first. Everyone's real close. Sawalich, he makes a little contact coming out of turn 4, giving a little bit of the bumper. Ben Rhodes and Hocevar then make contact, and Sawalich gets run on the inside. And as he's past them, you see Hocevar turn to the left and trying to send a message to the young driver, and Sawalich near about lost it, but was able to hang on to it through the corner. And, not real sure why this incident kicked off. I understand that Hocevar might not be happy, might feel like Sawalich pushed him up into Rhodes, most likely. But this is what kind of caught everyone's attention and put everyone's eyes on Hocevar. This was what kicked it all off. And I was listening to the scanner at this point and listening to Swalich's, and he kept asking, why did that happen? Why did the 42 do that? You could tell he wasn't happy. Props to his crew for keeping him calm and under control, basically telling him, hey, that's just the way, these things happen. It's nothing to worry about. Just focus on your job, and did a really great job at keeping the kid, calm down and not firing him up to go out there and do something stupid to make himself look bad. So, but then the big moment with Hocevar was on the restart. Just a few laps later, you had Matt DiBenedetto on the outside, Hocevar in the middle, and Gray on the inside. Now, contact is made coming out of the corner. We know how narrow Martinsville is, especially coming out of the corners. And when you're 3 wide, somebody's going to get their fenders rubbed. And Hocevar did, and it cut his left rear tire. And as they're going down the back straightaway, it looks like Hocevar straightens himself out and then turns dead left, trying to right rear Gray up into the outside wall, spin him across the whole field. But going back and looking at the video, which you can see, some people were arguing, that could it be Hocevar's left rear tire cut and just had no control of his truck. That's a valid argument. I'll give you that. When I posted about the deal with Gray and Hocevar, Daniel Vining of Pixelated Speed, who I enjoy following because he loves to ask the question of, well, what about this? He brings a whole nother thought to the process where everybody's going to be on one side. He's going to be over here going, now, wait a minute. What if this is the reason? And I like that. I like that, extra line of thinking and questioning. But it doesn't look to me like it was something with Hocevar losing his tire and just losing control of his truck, mainly because after he makes the contact that cut his tire, he kind of straightens it up, and it seems he just cuts the wheel to the left and tries to intentionally take out Gray. And it's tough to give Hocevar the benefit of the doubt with all that he has done in his career, all the incidents. I mean, I immediately think of Colby Howard last year at IRP, where he did spin Colby head on into the outside wall going into a corner. I mean, that's the one that sticks out. And I think when you're right rearing somebody into a wall, you don't need to be out on that track. Now, NASCAR did penalize him for 2 laps. Me personally, and a lot of people, the majority on social media, would have said park him for this race and probably the next one, just to send a message, because he's making a habit of doing these things. And the thing is, Hocevar, this time last year, was one of the most popular drivers in the truck series, in NASCAR in general. He had a huge fan following, still has a solid fan following, but incidents like this, it is turning people away from him. He has a lot of talent. I think could be a guy to make his way through the ranks and do a lot of good in this sport. But when you make decisions like this, when you keep doing these things, whether it's spinning out on purpose, to cause a caution because something didn't go your way, or trying to right rear a guy because they made contact with you on a short track, it's going to turn a lot of people off. And that's how you become a truck series lifer, not because of, lack of opportunities, or, because you get up there and you're not quite as successful as you were in the truck, so you go back, or anything like that, but simply because nobody is going to want to take a chance on an unproven talent when they have this type of issue of wrecking other drivers. Carson's still young and has plenty of time to turn it around. I'm not throwing that out the window. It's just, if he's going to do it, he's going to have to do a lot of image repair, and it's got to start immediately, because if he keeps doing these incidents like this, it's not going to be long for his opportunities elsewhere in the sport are going to dry up pretty quick. And that'll wrap up today's video. Thank you for joining me and watching along. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Don't forget, you can click on any of the links below to my weekly podcast, where this week we're going to be going over all the action from Martinsville from all 3 series. We're going to discuss Stewart-Haas Racing looking like their old self on Sunday, as well as Todd Gilliland, who continues to go on quite a run in that 38 car. And we're also going to look ahead to this upcoming weekend's action from Talladega Superspeedway. And also below in the description, you can find a link to my sponsor, hunttoharvest.com, where you can check out and get an update and upgrade to all your hunting apparel needs. Be sure to head over there, let them know we sent you. Use that promo code RADNEY18923. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their week, and we will see y'all same time next week going over all the action from Talladega Superspeedway.